Levels. It's all about levels. Hi, my name is Benedict. This video will try to be short, and it's all about, actually, layers, but borrowing from the levels Kramer gag from Seinfeld. Up, picture. I see people when they're mixing, well, they're not really mix engineers, and so they go at it the wrong way. Everything in mixing should be subtle, even if the result that you want is, it should be built up fairly subtly. Now you see someone like CLA being really aggressive, but CLA actually still mixes subtly. It's just he's bold in his movements, but it doesn't mean that his mixes lack subtlety. I may not like a lot of the material. I think a lot of the material lacks subtlety that he's mixing, but his mixing still has subtlety, despite his gung-ho approach to it, or apparent gung-ho approach to it. He's a showman as well, and fair enough. So what happens is that we'll start with something, and we'll say that it sounds a lot like this. And the person will have been working with this for some time like this and probably be very pleased with it. Fair enough. It's a nice little melodic loop with some nice little bits of movement in there. Electric piano, some strings. But if they've got attached to it, and I'm not just making this up because I was talking to somebody earlier today who was talking about how he gets attached to his MIDI sounds, and then somewhere down the track he listens to it and goes, ooh, that's not really very pleasant sounding. How do I get to the nicer sounds that other people seem to get to? Well, it's about layers. What happens is a mistake that people will go often headlong into mastering really early on. So this is a weird rig, but it's just designed for this purpose. So they'll turn on their mastering. Now, notice how this has very minimal effect. There is a nice mastering chain in here, but it doesn't have much to work on, so it kind of does nothing. So what will happen is that they will go, oh, well, it must be about volume. So they'll add a whole pile of level, like this, and go, oh, well, now my levels look good. Even so far as to say, well, look, Benedict, my RMS at -12, and therefore my LUFs are probably at about -14 or whatever, and my peaks are just under, so this must be the most perfectest thing ever. Okay, I get you, but you're mixing by numbers, not by feel. But worse, what happens is people do this kind of stuff. Now we have a smashed mess. If you can't hear it, that means you're not really ready to do the work yet. Let's say we pull 12 dB off, we've added 12, we've taken 12, hence my using this device to do this. You can see a lot of limiting to get our reduced dynamic range, but, well, it's a smashed mess. There is no joy in this. Matter of fact, we're undoing what we had before. The 6 and 6, adding and subtracting is okay because it brings us up to what we might call a better level. And it's not doing any damage anywhere, so that's okay. Even just adding 6, we can say, oh, well, that's good, fair enough. You're possibly right. But we have to work to the material that we've got. And at the moment, this appears to have a certain kind of sensitivity. And again, don't say to me, oh, well, Benedict, that can't be relevant because my music's supposed to be effing loud. Yeah, remember, great music, loud music, has a sensitivity to it as well. So let's not fall into the first trap of not doing the layers. As I said, if you listen to the bypass and not bypass here in the masters, we're really not hearing any difference at all, because the masters have got nothing to work with. So it's about layers. We want to build up layers. So we've got this material here, let's bypass that and look at what we've got. Firstly, we'll add a little bit of body to these sounds. Nice digital electric piano kind of sound. I can say that because I made it myself. Let's add an ensemble kind of chorus to it. Ooh, nice and... So that adds some presence, some body and width to it. And then we've got this string sound adding quite a lot of body to it. Hear how this moves that string out and your electric piano is centered? When we turn this on, it starts to kind of mush together. Now that can be good that it's mushing together, or it can be problematic. One of the nice things when we've got these off is the directness of that electric piano. So you might say, oh, okay, well, we'll do this and leave that there. But then the strings are in front of that electric piano. So our solution would be to change the stereo. Now by putting this into mono, it's really monoing the effect, but the original synth is in mono as well. We've got that muscularity, the punchiness, the directness of the electric piano and the wideness of the strings. We could equally go into our mixer and merely reduce the stereoification. If you don't have anything like that, then you have to introduce a doohickey like this one. Let's put that back into stereo. Let's say 50. 50. Electric piano is sort of bleeding everywhere into everything, which if you want it to be in the background is fine. But we've now focused it a lot tighter. All about levels or layers. We've put focus in, and this is really important. If we just make everything huge and wide, they mush together, which means that you then push harder later to try to get things to work. If we had more complex material, we might consider taking these strings and just moving them out a little bit. If we have a vocal, we might move our electric piano slightly to one side, and then our vocal is going to sit in the middle. All about layers, finding where something needs to sit in its layers, whether that's stereo width, stereo position, and levels. I'm happy enough with those, but the problem is they're still kind of pretty on top of each other, in which case we need to look at space. Now, I commonly look at the space of the whole room before I start putting things in space. You can do it the other way around, but then you might find it doesn't work. You've got to choose which path you take, but whichever path you take, understand it. So we add in some reverb. This is on a bus, send. It's pretty minimal. How that sort of gives a sense of just kind of togetherness. So we pop that in with... got a sense of some depth, some space around this. Yes, we lose some of that immediate forwardness, but if everything is forward, it's aggressive and not in a good way. So we've got now some movement, then we look at adding echoes. And we don't want to move our electric piano too far back. So I'm going subtly here. I'm not going to get into the detail because it's going to take a lot of time. Our string, that moves back. We can hear that seem to move back because the echoes are pulling it backwards. I've got quite a lot of videos between here and over on higher hertz on creating space and depth in a mix, if you want to look more at the nuts and bolts of how that's getting done. Kind of sticky taped to each other and flat. Moving those strings back. Well, again, while we could say, oh, we don't need to move that electric piano, it sounds kind of delaminated. It needs to belong somewhere in the room. So we give this little bit. Now we've got these two things that have depth in the room rather than just being like this. Winning, 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 winning. Now these are going into a bus. Once we turn the bus on, hear how that helps bring that piano forward again. So we can debate whether we actually need this one or not. In headphones, I really can't make a decision, but I'm happy enough to say that possibly we don't need that processing there at all. We don't need the monoing. What we're doing in here is a little bit of bus compression just to push things down, but where the compression key or signal is coming from is that electric piano. So we're using the electric piano to push the strings out of the way. And then a little bit of tape to make it exciteful. Great. See, these layers are now building up to give us something. If we hadn't done reverb, we'd pull in the reverb now. I would rather do it at the beginning, as I say, because every time you bring these things, there can be a feeling of things stepping back, but that's merely creating the space that you're working in. If you're saying my piece has no space that it works in, that's kind of strange, because everything has a space that it works in. Then we come to the masters. Notice before how the masters didn't really do anything? Now listen to them. They've got a far more marked difference now. So we've got some tape, we've got another form of compression here, a much slower form of compression to bring things together. A little bit of tape, saturation knob's always there. And now we can look at these again. Our master is now actually enhancing everything that we had. Making it sound nicer, and no EQ. There's no EQ anywhere in anything here. So let's look at what we would want to do. Let's say we add 3 dB. That to me sounds great. Obviously I'm in cans, but that sounds nice and comfortable. We're definitely not doing anything. There's no activity. Nothing's getting squashed or having anything unpleasant done to it. So that's probably where I would let this sit. Obviously a little irrelevant because we don't have a whole piece. But what's going to happen is people are going to do this. They're going to overmaster. The problem at this point of overmastering is that we start to flatten those layers that we've built. We build layers so that there is difference. And if we push too heavily into our mastering compressors and particularly our limiters, it's just going to flatten all of that up again. And you go, but wall of sound, Benedict. Listen to Phil Spector's wall of sound, and it's very different from the being hit with a brick wall of the modern thing. While that can have its purposes, listen to, again, Algae, Chris CLA's, Green Day, that stuff. It is loud. It is very loud. But there is a feeling of depth. You know, When September End, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, there's nice depth feeling in those. So, okay, adding a little bit is kind of cool. Let's add some more, see what happens. Okay, we're at the levels where we sort of say, ideally our mix would be. I feel like it's starting to get a bit loud. There may be a little bit of soft clipping happening here. Obviously we can't see it with any kind of meter, but we can put 6 dB here minus 3 dB here, and it does sound nice. Let's add another 3 dB, because that sounded good. we're starting to get diminishing returns here. It's louder, yes. But we're starting to flatten those layers. We're losing subtlety and impact. And you hear that, it's just, okay, it's sounding better because of this half, but then it's sounding a little not so good because of this half. So if we take these to 6, it's sounding better because of the first half, and let's say possibly no worse because of the second half. Then what if we do this? Smashed mess. Not only are we really damaging the material, but really what I hope you listen to and notice here is not so much the damaging of the material in the obvious sense, but we've crushed the sense of space and layers that we put in. Quite apart from the ghastly pumping, we've just flattened everything. So we put the time and trouble into making the layers and we flatten them. In which case you might as well just go, oh, okay, I'll do all of that stuff and just hear at the masters and I'm good. If that works for you, but hear how it still sounds terrible. These echoes that are supposed to put things in place are just not working. Nor is this. So please be super, super careful. If we put this +6 and let's say -3, then we're getting extra level for release, but we're not getting any damage being done to our actual sense of layers or levels in how everything is working. This is the really important thing about mixing, more than anything else, is to how do we add value? How do we bring in extra body space and tell that story? I hope this has been useful. If you want to hire me, you will find my link to my website below. There's a big form. Please fill that in, because the more I know about you, the more I can help. The less I know, the less I can help. And that includes pricing. If you have a budget, let me know earlier on, because we can talk about, well, we could do this and get the maximum impact with the minimum effort, because it's all about time. You can always change your mind later, but at least you can see here small moves sometimes can have quite big impacts. If you have a budget, we can probably help you achieve some fairly big impacts with relatively small amount of time moves. Or if you just want to be involved in conversation, I do have a group. It's relatively quiet, but there's none of the garbage that goes on in other places. All the links below. Otherwise, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and join the conversation below. You have a great day.